Welcome to Behind the Huddle with yours truly, Boston Mendenhall, where we dive into the minds of coaches and directors here at Northwest. Today's guest is girls cross country head coach, Coach Westerkamp. Some of you might remember him from 9th grade and 8th grade strength classes at Prairie View. But here at Northwest, he leads some of the best aerobic athletes. My siblings and I have always loved Mr. Westerkamp when we were in school, and it was really cool to hear his perspective outside of the classroom. And without further ado, here is Coach Westerkamp. Welcome to Behind the Huddle, where we dive into the minds of coaches and directors here at Northwest. I'm your host, Boston Mendenhall, and today we have the privilege of talking to Coach Westerkamp, the girls cross country head coach. Today we're going to dive in the foundations of what it took to build the cross country team, the strategies behind the scene in order for him to get to where the team is currently at, and his unique approach to championships. Welcome to the show, Coach Westerkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Mendenhall, for having me.
So before you kind of started coaching here at Northwest, what was kind of your experience with cross country?
Actually, my experience with cross country was very limited. When I was an athlete in high school, my fall sport was football, actually. My running sport would have been track and field, but I was never like a true distance runner like you would normally have for cross country. And it actually wasn't until the split between Waukee High and Northwest High that I saw the position open, and I figured I would give it a shot and see if I could bring some success to the distance running, and at the same time learn a lot about probably one of my bigger weaknesses, which is distance running.
So when you kind of accepted the job here at Northwest, it was probably a big leap and stuff for you. But like, what were kind of the core pillars that you wanted to kind of build this program? Like, what did you want the program to represent?
Sure. And I had been an assistant coach for the very successful Waukee High track and field team for a long time. And I had some awesome mentors that taught me a lot about really coaching the athlete as a whole, and not just like as an athlete, or like not just the competitive side, but also like the student side of them, the personal lives of them. And that was a big influence for me. So then when I took over as cross-country head coach, my priority was to focus on like each individual and then try to provide an environment where the athlete, the girls, felt supported at all times, and try to put them in positions where we could build confidence, and not just focus on like the end goal of like running fast or PRing or whatever.
Yeah. So who were like kind of the coaches that Waukee that kind of like influenced you to either to take the job in general, or just to kind of how you approach just being with students?
I think my biggest influences probably would have been Jesse Hunt, who is actually an Apex instructor now, and he coaches out in ADM now. And then Matt Priest, who is also a teacher at Waukee High, and he actually assistant coaches in the spring with me for track and field. But they both were very organized individuals that really cared a lot about the kids, the athletes, and that had a huge impact on me. And then trying to like grow my knowledge of the sport. And as I said before, like it's probably one of my biggest weaknesses was distance running originally. So they taught me a lot about like when you're coaching, you need to be a student of the sport and try to reflect that onto the athletes too. And then I like to read books, not a lot, but on occasion at least. And one of the authors I'm really into is John Gordon, who is kind of, I guess you might call him like a motivational or like self-help author kind of. Yeah. But his approach was a lot about like positive energy and positivity. And like he has a book called You Win in the Locker Room First. And that was really impactful on me when I read it, and just talking about like you build the team first and you connect the team with each other first, then you can start like worrying about like the athletic success of the program. Yeah.
So kind of tying into this, this is kind of an analogy I like to make with all these interviews. Mm-hmm. Have you ever played chess before?
Yes.
Right? So like there's the opening, mid-game, and end-game, right? You're the first coach that can remember that can do this. So like every single one has a different strategy, right? Certain openings are going to set you up for best success. So kind of in your personal opening, when you're looking to make a roster and kind of make them gel in that whole locker room thing that you're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. What are you like looking for in order to just try to make the team? Obviously, you have what you have. There's no draft. There's no anything like that, right? Although that would be insane. That would be so freaking cool. How do you kind of try to build your roster for the best success?
Yeah, I would say like, so when you were playing chess, like you want as many pieces as you can have by the end, right? Anyways, because you can do more with more pieces. My strategy, as I took over the program, was to get as many girls out for the team as possible. In other words, like I don't cut people because they're slow or because they're injured or anything like that. Everybody has a home on our team within reason, right? I have expectations for attendance and stuff. But I also wanted the girls to start having a good time, because once they learn that this is more than just running and more than just competing, and they're actually like building relationships with each other, then they start talking about it outside of practice, and that gets more girls involved and more people involved, and we have a lot of success from girls that just decided to try cross country that never tried before, and here they are, and we have success now because of girls taking risks because they just hear about it from other people.
Just the numbers, yeah. So usually this happens with a lot of sports and basically every sport ever. Usually there's like a top amount of athletes that are coming back who are going to be like those varsity spots, right? You're basically like almost before season, I'm guessing you probably have a decent idea who the top 5 are, or top 3 or top 4. Like, how do you decide, or just not even like towards the beginning of the season, or like begin to formulate like what are the attributes they look for at someone to try to fill that 6-7 or the JV spots that are like the 1-2, right? Like who makes the cut, and like what attributes do you look for? Because at some point it's not about times anymore, because every single person's time is going to be 5 seconds off, 10 seconds off from each other. So like what are you looking at to like differentiate words are hard differentiate one from another and put them in that position or spot?
Sure. I would say right now, like going into the summer, we have everybody's like season best and personal best from previous years. The difficult thing, especially in girls athletics, is freshmen and sophomores have a higher chance of competing at the varsity level than like boys do in boys sports. Maturity and stuff like that? Yeah. And there's honestly, there's certain body changes that occur, between 12 years old and 18 years old that women will endure too, that can have an impact on their performance. And we don't plan or think on those things, and that's why like using time is going to be important too. But when we start training, we group girls based on where they are at that time, and then they can have the opportunity to like train together and improve together. And that's actually one of our strengths right now, is like we are really good on the JV side and varsity side on like packing up in the race, and like all the girls run really similar times. It's not usually that way, but that's an advantage we have right now. And I think a lot of that comes from like the data that we collect going into the season and then throughout the season, and then trying to be really strategic on like the workouts we design and how we group girls during those workouts to take advantage of that.
And have the best possible results and everything like that. Yeah,
exactly.
So like when you can't rely on times for a decision, like what do you have to like what do you like when you're seeing through times? What are you looking at? Like, is it someone's toughness? Is it just like purely, oh, you've been here more than the other person? Like, is it just that, or is it there something that you're looking for, like someone's mentality, like how they're attacking the like repeat Ks or whatever? Like, what are you looking for in certain athletes?
Sure. I do look at a lot of those intangibles, right, that are outside, like just the concrete data. And I love athletes that are mentally tough, that like can just kind of grit their teeth and bear down on a workout or in a race too. The thing that we have to be really mindful of is the athletes that everybody has doubts or anxieties when it goes into competitions, regardless of if it's cross country or football or whatever. And I do think female athletes approach competitions a little bit different. And female athletes, generally speaking, and granted I'm a male saying this, but female athletes, generally speaking, already kind of compare themselves to each other a little bit. And from the outside looking in as a male, it does seem like the girls already have like a rough idea of kind of like where they're at in like the pecking order or the competitive order because of some of those things. And in some instances don't have as much like self-confidence that like some males do or boys do. You know, if you compare a varsity football player to a varsity cross country runner, very different personalities, I think, generally speaking, of course. But we really try to prepare each practice talking about, like, here's what we want you to be thinking about when things start to get hard, and here's how this part of the workout translates into like how you're going to feel or what you might be thinking at this part of the race too, to kind of mentally prepare them for what they're going to endure. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, it's a great life lesson too in a lot of ways. That's why sports is so great, because it'll teach you some of those life things too. But if you can really, like, you know, kind of buck up during the workout and quiet those voices that makes you want to externalize, like, oh, I'm feeling tired, I'm feeling sleepy, or this hurts or whatever. If you externalize that now spreads to the people around you, and then they start thinking, oh, especially if they see you as a leader, they start thinking, oh, it's like if the leader or the person that's really good is having these issues, then maybe it's okay if I have issues too, or maybe it's okay if I slow down too. And so we try to be mindful of some of those things too.
Yeah. Kind of talking about like that passing between everything. This happened with a lot of people, and kind of what you're talking about, just getting people there. A lot of people say cross country is a very great sport, not because me personally, it's terrible. It's not terrible. It's just really freaking hard, right? A lot of people do it for something like the social aspect, right? I hear that a lot from a lot of different people, and how just inclusive everyone is as a team. How do you like help cultivate that? Because obviously, like, I don't love the word culture because I feel like it's just a buzzword that everyone throws around, right? Mm-hmm. But to some extent, it has some merit. So, like, how would you build like either the idea or just kind of that whole concept of you're there for the social aspect? Obviously, you're still there to compete, but at the same time, making it fun.
Mm-hmm. I know it does. I use the term culture all the time, and it does feel like one of those buzzwords, those what do you call it? Like your resume words, right? Culture. And we might, inject vibe into that. Like, what's the vibe of the team? It's important to me, first and foremost, to build the relationships. And when girls sign up to go out for cross country, I mean, they know that already the team is big, and most of them probably know that only 7 to 10 girls are going to make the varsity roster. You only score 5 of those 7 or 10. You only score 5 of the 40 or 45 girls that run JV. Most of them know that they're not going to be scoring, but they go out for the team because they're having fun. And one of the approaches that we take, and I'll credit my assistants on this too, is that, and some of the girls do bring me ideas too, but we try to start our practice or end practice with I call it a team builder, just about every other day at least. It kind of depends on what we have planned for the workout and how long it'll take. But we'll do physical challenges. We'll do just like social time. We'll like foam roll or stretch while we're talking to our peers. We'll partner up and do things. I challenged all the girls that by last Friday, they should know everybody's name on the team. And listeners might think, well, shouldn't all the athletes know everybody's name on the team? Well, these are, 25% of the team doesn't even live in that building, right? They're at Prairie View, at a different building. And they don't normally interact with each other, and everybody has their friend cliques outside of cross country too, so they aren't spending time together. And so that was a big challenge for us, is try to get everybody, the bare minimum was to get everybody's name first. Then we can start building on those relationships a little bit more, but trying to be purposeful in having interactions outside of our friend groups at the start of practice or at the end of practice was a big thing for us to help encourage girls to have fun. But then we plan, we have team dinners. We used to have a team trivia on like a random Sunday night just to get people together, which we're not doing this year. We talked about having a movie night. Like we try to do all these things to try to just get girls to just spend time together and kind of get out of their shell a little bit. And once they are a little bit more comfortable with themselves and each other, then it's a lot easier to keep building those relationships.
Kind of when it comes to the first practice of the year, what are kind of like those team builders that you do to kind of just either set the tone for the team and then like start to eventually create the relationships and start to evaluate people and stuff like that?
Some of the more popular ones that the girls kind of still talk about that we only do like once a year, if that, is I've like soaked a bunch of like cotton shirts and then like folded them up and frozen them like in my freezer. And then in like small groups, they like try to like thaw out the shirt and have somebody put one on as quickly as you can, right? So this is somewhat of a physical competition, a little bit of a cognitive competition, but at the end of the day, it's like, it's hot out. They're all sweating. Yeah. It's nice to just handle something cold and do something silly at the same time. Yeah. A couple weeks back on a hot day, we filled up, like moving totes, like storage totes, I guess, with water. And they all laid on their backs and tried to like balance it with their feet. And then we would do different challenges while they're trying to suspend this water with their legs. And inevitably everybody gets soaked at some point, but it's nice because it's hot out and it's a silly activity. We've done some weird, I called it carry the boats, and we took turns like carrying each other across a volleyball court safely. Trying to just do a bunch of random stuff, that involves some movement, because movement is important, but also is also silly. And quite frankly, I like competitions or games that require some sort of hands-onness, because I think when you break a little bit of that physical barrier too, it makes things a lot less awkward. And if you think about like the first day of school or whatever, when you're in a class, your teachers will have your icebreakers or whatever, try to get to know you. And you might not know everybody as a sophomore especially, and you're kind of like, I don't really know. But once you like push through that, that glass ceiling of like awkwardness just by like literally making physical contact with somebody else, it becomes a lot less awkward, in my opinion. And so we try to do those things a lot.
Yeah. Kind of moving towards like those mid games where you're kind of into the season, you kind of understand what you have and everything like that. When it comes to like those in-season adjustments, because obviously you have a team, you kind of maybe gone through like a meet or two, and you've obviously done this for a few seasons. So like you kind of have a general idea of what kind of happens. What factors you kind of look at when you make those like decisions in that midseason?
We really try to remind the girls that, and our team motto actually this year is earning over deserving. And we remind girls that like nothing is like set in stone. There's nothing that says like, hey, you had a great race, you're guaranteed a varsity spot or whatever, or like, hey, you had a poor race, doesn't mean you're going to stay in this position. Like things are fluid and they're constantly changing. And I think that helps kind of stimulate the competitiveness in a lot of ways. But we also look at like who's getting hurt, like who's injured, who has overuse injuries, who's going to see the trainer a lot, who's missing workouts for injuries. And then we try to cooperate with like Athletico and some of the trainers that we have and physical therapists that we have to try to meet those needs of not only those girls, but as a team, because I kind of feel like that is a reflection of the weaknesses that we have as a team too. And we use that information and that data to try to do like some extra exercises or extra mobility stuff to help kind of prevent injuries. Because as I say at Prairie View in our weightlifting classes, like if you're an injured athlete, you're kind of a wasted athlete, and not quite literally, but it's not fun sitting on the sidelines, not being able to participate, and especially when all your friends are out there still doing it. So we try to reduce that as much as we can. But as far as like a strategic standpoint of like moving people around, it's still, and fortunately enough in cross country or track and field, you have the concrete data that says like this person has ran really well the last 2 weeks. This person has not ran well. We're going to give this person a shot, and this person can make an attempt at JV or the 9-10 race or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So like when it comes to some of those conversations with someone moving, like how do you approach a conversation where you're holding them accountable, but at the same time keeping them motivated to continue in the season?
Yeah. I literally just had a conversation today at the start of practice, and it's never fun for me. I wish I could just send an email or text the person, because that'd be so much easier than having a face-to-face conversation. But I think it's important that athletes are treated like professionals too in a lot of ways. Yeah. And so an example is this conversation I had today is this girl's ran really well the last couple of weeks. But some other girls are running really well too, and are barely beating them in some meets. And I just explained it to her. It's like, it's nothing you're doing wrong. You're still doing great in workouts, but you can't control how other people perform. And some other people are performing really well right now. And we want to give them an opportunity to hold down a varsity spot and see how they do in a varsity race. And, you try to put the positive spin on it too, of like, because, they can shut down that moment, get upset, or they can just ignore me and just be angry. Like, it just kind of all depends, or they can just accept it. But in this instance, luckily, I have a good relationship with this athlete, and they kind of, as I said before, girls are always paying attention. They compare themselves a lot, generally speaking. And she was kind of like, I kind of already expected this to happen, but that doesn't make it any easier to hear it either. So in this instance, it's a hard conversation, but she more or less was kind of mentally prepared for it. But I also try to have the positive spin of like, you still get the race and you're still going to go crush it on the JV side. And by the way, our JV team is very, very good too, and would run varsity in a lot of other teams right now. So it's an unfortunate conversation, but it's really important to make sure that it's not really about them. It's about other people, and that it's not necessarily something that they're doing wrong, but it's other people doing, really great physical feats. And we want to reward that too and give them an opportunity to spotlight that on the varsity side.
Yeah. This happens a lot with a lot of different athletes, and I know a lot of coaches run into it. How do you help your athletes differentiate like I am cross country versus like I am a human who runs cross country, kind of like the defined by times kind of idea? Like, how do you help athletes, especially when a lot of these hard conversations happen, like especially when it comes to movement, like whatever, like how do you like help them get through that whole idea of like, I'm defined by times, like I am a cross country runner versus I am a human who runs cross country?
I know that's a really difficult dichotomy, really, because you want them to have that as their identity, because everything that happens at practice time with the team is all like, that's the bare minimum, right? So like when they go home, they can choose to eat poorly because they're not on practice time anymore. They can choose to sleep poorly because they're not on practice time anymore. But everything that happens at practice is like the bare minimum, and then everything they do outside of practice can also have an impact on how they perform. But at the same time, like tomorrow's not guaranteed for anybody. And, like it happens all the time where like an athlete all of a sudden has a season-ending injury or career-ending injury, heaven forbid. And all of a sudden like that part of themselves is needing to be rewired. Like they need to find a new mission or find something else that they can do. Usually that means that, if they were in season, they could finish the season as like a manager and help out the team and attend meets and all that stuff. But as a person, they need to find something else that they can find success in or be good at. And any adults listening know that happens all the time. Like that doesn't define who you are, but it is part of your identity, and you have to just find another way to work through it. I don't have a magic pill or an easy button for that, but I do tell the girls that everything that happens at practice is the bare minimum. There's always something you can do at home to help improve your performance. But like being a runner is part of your identity, but it doesn't necessarily define who you are, because you're also a brother, you're also a sister, you're also a student, you're also, an aunt or an uncle maybe. Like there's so many other things or so many other facets to you that are also important. And at the end of the day, when you go home, most moms and dads don't care if you're not a cross country runner anymore, right? They still are going to love you. Most younger siblings aren't going to care if you're not out for cross country anymore. They're still going to love you, and they're still going to want to play football with you or play tag in the backyard or whatever. Like it's not all about cross country all the time.
Mm-hmm. Kind of moving to like kind of the end game where it comes to like playoffs and then competing for state and competing for spots and trying to advance your team to like get the glorified state championship, right? Like how do you prepare your team mentally for these big meets, whether that's conference, whether that's just someone who's on varsity for the first time trying to make a name for themselves? Like how do you motivate them and help them like handle the pressure that will be on their shoulders? Because I mean, students already have enough pressure from school and work and all these other things. So how do you help them get through that or get prepared for something big?
I think it depends on each individual. Some people are completely prepared for that and ready for that and want that stress, that anxiety, that pressure. Other people are not ready at all. And so you kind of have to read them and get to know them a little bit throughout the season to kind of know like where they're at. But a lot of me would say it's not necessarily like the state meet, it's another meet on a course that we've ran before. And there's not a ton that changes except that the weather's probably going to be a little bit cooler, and that the start of the race, generally speaking, is way faster than any other race, which can scare the crap out of you. But if we do a good job as coaches and as veteran teammates, because it's not just on the coaches, but if veteran teammates and coaches can help prepare that athlete as best they can, then it makes it a little bit easier and it's not so scary that first time out. But I think, when it comes to this crunch time, it's important that we continue to like encourage the girls and, empower them and try to build their confidence through a lot of the workouts or a lot of things we say now, because that will pay dividends in 3 or 4 weeks time when like the competitive side of the season really matters. Today, we have a meet tomorrow, and when this is, being recorded, and today we had a conversation about how difficult the course is that we're running on tomorrow. But we reminded the girls that like we've been doing hard hilly workouts to prepare for the hills at this meet. Yeah. And at the same time, like we're not training for this meet, we're training for conference, we're training for state qualifier and potentially state down the road too. So reminding the girls that like all these are designed to build their confidence and help feed them. And then when we visualize the night before meets, then we visualize like conquering and overcoming those difficult challenges physically and mentally too.
Yeah. And how has your coaching style evolved based on certain things you've seen? Because obviously, as you stated in the beginning, you're not exactly going on a 12-mile run on your Tuesday afternoon, right? So how has like you and all your different learnings changed based off like your prior experiences and how other people and like how you've reacted to the team and how they accepted, your training plans and stuff like that? Like how have your approach changed?
Oh yeah. Well, for those of you listening, I'm 6'2" and 200 pounds, and I'm not a great runner by any means. And if you look at me, you'd say probably athletic, not a distance runner. So, it's definitely still continuing to be an adjustment. I'm still being a student of the sport and trying to figure out like what I don't know, and adapt to that. I've been fortunate enough to have some incredible assistant coaches that do have some distance running background and very successful backgrounds, that help kind of keep me in check and to help me produce training plans that help the girls become really successful. But the reality is like everybody kind of has their own individual needs too. And so something we're trying to get better at this year, more so than any other year, is trying to meet each girl where they're at. And instead of just having, like everybody's running this time or everybody's doing this exact workout, we try to make adjustments based on like the fitness levels of different girls or the type of times that they're running. Or like, if we're expecting them to compete at state, 75%, 80% of the girls are not going to be on that roster when it comes down to crunch time at the end of the season. And so like we need them to like be their best in like 2 weeks time and not in like 3 or 4 weeks time. So we have to make adjustments for them too. But I really continue to talk to other coaches and get their opinion and feedback on certain things. But yeah, my assistants have been great about that. Every year, I have like kind of a meeting, a breakdown with my assistants, and we look at what went well, what did not go well, what do we want to get better at, what do we want to know more about. And we kind of put a plan together for the following year or like the next summer to start putting those things into place. And then at the same time, I meet with a lot of like the returning athletes and kind of do like a debrief of the season and figure out like, what did you like most about the season, like as just like a student, and what did you like most about the season as like a runner? What did you not like? What would you like us to do differently, kind of like a checkout process that we collect a bunch of notes on and we take back as coaches and kind of figure out like what do we need to change or improve on the following year so we can continue to build and get better.
Mm-hmm. I ask a lot of coaches this, but do you have like a whiteboard at your house, similar to like the one right here, with like everyone's names, and you like rotate them around based off times? Do you have something like that?
Feels like a scene of Friday Night Lights or something.
Yeah.
I do not. But I also live and die off of spreadsheets. So I have a ton of spreadsheets that have our rosters. It has our season best. I have graphs. I have all sorts of stuff like that we use for like planning for trainings and stuff like that. But fortunately, like we're not talking about like any skilled positions like you would in football or basketball or like size positions like you would in basketball. It's like strictly, did you run a fast 5K? What were your times? Here's who's likely going to be on the varsity roster the following year. And then we adjust accordingly once we see like who the incoming freshmen are, or we use the incoming freshman times from their 8th grade year to kind of roughly see how good they are or will be as a runner. But yeah, no whiteboard, but lots of spreadsheets.
So coming up into the season, obviously we're in the season. What has surprised you from this team so far, and then what kind of can we expect coming towards that conference meeting, the state state contention and all that kind of stuff?
I think the part of your question that sprung out to me most was like, what were the surprises, I guess, from the season? Yeah. And quite honestly, like as a team, the middle school team was decent last year. And ironically, I guess, based off of a lot of the miles that some of those girls put in over the summer, I would say almost half of our current varsity roster, like going into our meet tomorrow, for example, is either freshmen, so from the middle school team last year, or new to cross country. And a lot of that is because they put in a ton of work over the summer. Yeah. But we've, it kind of boils back to like our goal was to get more girls out for cross country, get girls to try something for the first time by making it a fun environment and a positive environment. And more or less because of that process, and also some encouragement from other coaches, other teachers and stuff like that to go out for the sport. Because of that, we're having a little bit more of a successful season this year than in previous years. As far as like state contention goes, we haven't really talked a ton about like state qualifier or anything like that yet. We really talk about how like we're training for conference right now. And fortunately our conference is so competitive that it is kind of like a state preview in a lot of ways. But if we can compete well when we see those teams in races now, we know that we can compete well or look for those uniforms that we want to pass on a meet day at the end of October or November 1st.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show. And as a little closing, could you give us like your favorite memory for being a coach so far? Whether that's something that happened at a meet, whether that's something just happened at practice, something said, or something like that.
A ton of things comes to mind. There was a girl that was injured on our team last year that she like did not compete the entire season, and then at the conference meet, she decided to just say like to hell with it and just try to run the race, no matter how much pain she was in, just to kind of cap off her senior year and not being able to really run. And I got really emotional just like watching her finish the race, just because like I knew how much pain she had endured and how many doctor's appointments, blah, 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 all those things that you deal with as that person, and just letting them like run a race and just kind of be a person, like be a student athlete, was fun for me. As far as outside of competitions go, though, I have a daughter, Holly. She's like 3.5 years old right now. She's very cute. She came to a lot of practices over the summer. She still comes by practice at the end every once in a while, like maybe once a week. And about every year right now during homecoming week, the girls like somehow pick a day to like go behind my back and like dress as her as like a homecoming day for practice. And so a couple years back, I didn't realize what was happening at first, but I brought all the girls together to like take their picture for like a dress up day. And then like I realized that like some of them had like dressed up as me or dressed up as Holly, and I was like, what the heck? And it just made me laugh. And then it happened again this year. Like a bunch of girls showed up with like scooters and helmets and sunglasses because that's what my daughter wore. And like it took me a while to put it together, but I'm like, hey, come over for a picture. And then I got the joke, and I was like, it's just little things like that make me feel appreciated, but it also shows me like the girls are having a good time and they're having fun. And at the end of the day, that's more important than just how we finish at the end of the season competitively too. So,
Well, thanks so much for coming on. It has been a pleasure. I mean, hope you guys do great in conference and everything like that. I mean, I can't imagine running. It's really hard. I mean, day in and day out, just continuing doing everything. So thanks so much for coming on.
It's hard. Well, Boston, thanks for having me. I appreciate the questions.
Of course. Thanks again to Coach Westerkamp for coming on the show. You can find all information around the Northwest girls cross country team at the Instagram, which will be in the show notes. Also, the next meet is the CIML conference meet at Southeast Polk at 5 o'clock. It's on the 16th of October. Thanks again to Coach Westerkamp for coming on the show, and until next time.